Good morning. I'm delighted to be here in Mississippi. As he mentioned, I am a neighbor just across the border, although that border is deep and wide because it took me 6 hours to drive here. I kept saying, "Are you sure I can't fly here from Lake Charles?" They said you can't get there from here. So delighted to be here and to talk to such a large and distinguished group of people that are about the same work that I've been about for 37 years. I began my career, as many of you are probably working now, teaching in an elementary classroom. Spent over a decade as a library media specialist where I got infected with technology and the possibilities for our children and for really improving learning, in our world. Then spent 8 years as a school principal, led 2 different campuses, wired the first school in Louisiana that had the internet when no one knew how to spell the internet, gave teachers email and they said, what? And then for the last 12, 13 years, I've been the chief technology officer, working at the district level and really an opportunity to do a lot of grassroots work, helping teachers, helping administrators really understand that it's not about the technology at all. It's about the teaching and learning, and it's about the new toolkit of the 21st century, which is technology, to help us all learn how we can meet the needs of today's generation, not just today, but into the future. I was telling Dr. White, sitting next to me, my colleague from Lake Charles, that I felt like I got a setup for my speech this morning with the work that was being referenced from Dot and about the endless possibility of technology. And I'd like to ask all of you to just kind of go to the Wayback Machine with me and think back to August of 1988. And there was a group of students and their parents getting ready to begin kindergarten, all that excitement, and none of us probably had any idea what the headlines were that day or why those students' entrance to school was so different from the thousands that had come before them. August 1988 was not really considered a time where anybody was thinking about Y2K. Nobody was thinking about, well, what is school going to be like when these children are in high school? That wasn't even on the radar. But you see, this group was the class of 2001, the class of the new millennium. And while some kind of cringe and think about that Y2K and all the fear that came out of it and think about problems, I bet some of you in this room were thinking about that as a great adventure. And I know that because some of you were young enough in here to have been on the cusp of beginning your career then. Well, my son was one of those students. He began school in 1988, and I raised what they call a millennial child, a child destined to grow up in the net generation, a child that needed, a child that wanted, a child that demanded a different kind of education. And our classrooms across this country, and certainly throughout Mississippi, are filled with these students. Thinking about that reminds me of a book. Once a librarian, always a librarian. A book that I read to my children, a book that I've read to many, many students. It's one of those classic Dr. Seuss books about the exciting things that children will see and learn about when they grow up. Oh, the places you'll go. Well, I believe that no one, not even all the hotshot futurists, not even Nostradamus, envisioned the places that we would go, and much less the places we would take our students with technology. But there's one thing I've always believed and believed from that very first day that I spent in a classroom in the fall of 1972, that all the places that we will go and all the things that we accomplish are only limited by our very own imagination. Futurist David Thornburg relates that the 20th century was the age of information, but the 21st century is the age of imagination. Over 50 years ago, even Albert Einstein contended that imagination is more important than knowledge. I recently completed an outstanding book, From Good to Great by Jim Collins, and I suggest that anyone that is interested in improving organizations take time to read it. I took note of the chapter about technology. That's where I honed in. Jim Collins discusses the 1999 Time magazine Person of the 20th Century. Who do you think that was? Maybe Churchill or Stalin or Hitler or Gandhi? People who truly changed the course of history for better or for worse. No, they chose Einstein. Why did they select Albert Einstein? Well, Collins tells us that the Time editors, when asked to explain their choice, wrote that it's hard to compare the influence of statesmen with that of scientists. Nevertheless, we can note that there are certain areas that were most defined by their politics, others by their culture, and others by their scientific advances. So how will we remember the 20th century? I think there's no doubt we will remember it for democracy and certainly for civil rights, but the 20th century will be most remembered for its earth-shaking advances in science and technology, which advanced the cause of freedom in some ways more than any politician or statesman did. And in a century that will be remembered foremost for science and technology, one person stands out as the paramount icon of that time, Albert Einstein. In essence, what Jim Collins shares with us is that the Time editors didn't pick the person of the century so much as they picked the theme of the century, technology and science. And then they attached the most famous person to that. But interestingly enough, just a few days before that announcement about the person of the year, about the concept of the year, they announced the person of the year for 1999. And who did they pick? None other than the poster child of e-commerce, Jeff Bezos of Amazon.com, reflecting our cultural obsession with technology-driven change. Well, I submit to you that we have a unique challenge today. A challenge for all of our school systems to harness the power and the promise of technology to engage students in new and innovative ways. To tap into that innate pool of creativity that young children come to public schools with and harness that intellectual potential if we are going to continue to be relevant and if our schools are going to continue to be relevant in the future. We must harness the power and the promise of technology for all of our children. But the Mississippi schools are the great equalizer for every student. And technology is the element that assures that every student can compete, not just with the students in their city and their state and our country, but compete globally. But hearing this, I don't think is just enough for me to come all the way from Lake Charles, Louisiana. And we know that if you get in a car, you get on an airplane, and certainly if you drive 6 hours, then you must be an expert. I'd like you to hear it from the real experts, if this technology works, but it will.
The U.S. Department of Commerce ranked 55 industry sectors by their level of IT intensiveness. Education was ranked number 55, the lowest, below coal mining.
For the industrial narrative, schools are like factories, it's an administrative process, it's about control.
Having a much more stimulating and rich environment outside of schools than they are in school.
Kids are very rich content developers today through their social networking sites. They're big communicators through email, instant messaging, and text messaging, and yet all of those things are banned from their schools.
If you turned off the choice, you potentially turned off child.
We have to accept as educators that technology is not really a choice. It has created a world. It's just not here to help you teach traditional subjects. It has invented, has emerged a kind of new environment.
It's about relationship, it's about community, it's about connectivity, it's about access.
Children are living now in a different space. They're living in what I call nearly now. And nearly now is that space that they're texting, a space that they update their Facebook entries in, the space that they Twittering, the space that is not quite synchronous. Now, it's a really interesting space because it's not adversarial, it's not pressured. It's a space where people can, it's all the R words, they can reflect and retract and research and repeat, it's a very gentle, I tell you what, it's a great world for learning.
If I could remodel a classroom today, I'm not sure it would be a bricks and mortar classroom. So the student is at the center, and school is just one of the ways and places that they learn. But they also learn through communities, at home, in museums, in libraries, and of course, online. It's about providing the best quality teachers no matter where a student lives and making those bridges.
It's wandering around the city with their cell phones and collecting data that kids will be doing outside of school.
The school might be the place where you come together to do joint projects, where you social network, where you do some of the other kinds of enrichment things. We've got a classroom system when we could have a community system.
It's about opening the door to NASA resources, to the labs that are being developed online at MIT, and connecting these students to the kinds of opportunities that will fundamentally shift their academic experience and make them better prepared not only for college, but for life.
Start with the teacher. If I want my students to be making global connections, then I'm going to give the tools to my teachers first and provide them with opportunities to connect with other teachers around the world or other teachers around the country.
The task here is to give teachers a place where they can swap authentic ingredients and the evidence that those ingredients are safe and tested. Do you know that doesn't exist anywhere in the world? I've just been part of a big project that I think is going to change that radically.
We have to develop a narrative that sustains 21st century learning.
If we simply apply standards, if we simply have a steady regime of standardized testing, that will make things better. When in fact, it is economically actually a foolish idea, because the jobs that these kids in school will be having do not call for this kind of right answer vending machine approach.
There is no job that can fade away. It enables global creativity and innovations.
They will be doing work that calls on their artistic abilities, that calls on their abilities of synthesis, that calls on their abilities of understanding context, that calls on their abilities of working in teams, that calls on their abilities in some sense to be multidisciplinary, multilingual, multicultural.
So the coin of the realm is not memorizing the facts that they're going to need to know for the rest of their lives. The coin of the realm will be, do you know how to find information? Do you know how to validate it? Do you know how to synthesize it? Do you know how to leverage it? Do you know how to communicate it? Do you know how to collaborate with it? Do you know how to problem solve with it? That's the new 21st century set of literacies. And it looks a lot different than the model that most of us were raised in.
Now we're looking at a whole different range of schools. We're looking at schools that are producing genius, collaborative, gregarious, brave children who care about stuff like their culture. And to build schools that do that is a whole other challenge. And around the world, people are testing out the ingredients of what makes that work. And those ingredients are being assembled into some just stunning recipes in different places. It's a very exciting time of learning. It's the death of education, but it's the dawn of learning. That makes me very happy.
I recognized a long time ago that technology and the possibilities that it implied, not just for business and industry, but the huge, huge potential that it possessed for regular folks. Teachers just like you and I, like the ones I had in my second grade classroom, the ones I had in my library, the 3 I had sitting at home, that technology was not only going to impact their lives in ways that I could not imagine, but technology and all it implied was going to change their life, and it would be their life. So I began what I term my incredible journey, my attempt to make some sense of why this technology thing is so important for our kids, the kids in the public school classrooms, and the kids in my house. Now, we're going to go way back again, because I know there's some people that are baby boomers in here, and this technology thing began in earnest. about 1976, when those two California whiz kids, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, founded that Apple Computer Company. Remember that Apple Computer Company? We used to call it the Rainbow Fruit Company. And you know, the rest is history. And some of you may remember the beginnings of technology, the Apple II. It had this powerful 4K of memory, and we had to use our television set. Our television set as the monitor. But it was the first mass-marketed computer, and we were so excited. Then in '79, we heard this term, famous term, but maybe it was really infamous term, upgrade. And we got this Apple II computer, 48K. Well, we were really moving fast, and it had a color monitor, and it only cost for the mere sum of $2,200. Soon along came the fancy computers, the TRS-80, the TI-9948 that had cassette cartridges, and we could write programs that made turtles go around on the screen. Well, that was my first computer, and I bought it at Kmart. It was a blue light special. Can't make that kind of stuff up. And I took that computer to my library, and when I saw the look in my kids' eyes when they sat down in front of it, they were gone and I was gone. And as Paul Harvey says, you know the rest of the story. And I came this morning to talk to you in depth and maybe enlighten you. And I guess it was all because of Kmart had a blue light special. But you know that Kmart computer, it challenged me. It challenged my colleagues, because when I talked my principal into giving me a school check, and I took 15 parents with a blank check to Kmart and bought a computer for every teacher in the school, well, it scared the heck out of them. And those 15 computers began my career in being a techno champion for technology staff development. And I'm still on my soapbox 20 years later, because I believe, well, I firmly believe that only through thoroughly investing in technology staff development for our educational workforce will we really, truly recognize the endless possibilities of technology for our schools. But I think we have to ask ourselves a tough question. Do my students have the opportunities every day to use a range of technologies to support their learning? And if the answer is, Sheryl, maybe not, then I think you should listen to one of our colleagues from South Dakota. She says, technology reduces the tyranny of the classroom. When she was pressed for an explanation, she said, too many teachers have been holding their children hostage for far too long, forcing them into one modality, one learning style, one pace, really essentially limiting students' opportunities to learn. Technology allows students to learn despite the system's limitations. I recently read an article in Technology Pathfinder for Administrators. It's published by the Master Teacher folks, and it is a top-notch article and research piece. And it was the best explanation that I've found about providing professional development for staffs in educational technology. You see, to really maximize the use of technology in schools, when it comes to that implementation piece, we've got to think about the generation gap. And there are at least 4 generations or cohorts that are represented in our schools today. And they vary in age from early 20s to mid-60s. And when you stop and think about it, there's some veteran teachers in our schools that have been in classrooms longer than some of their younger colleagues have been alive. Different generations exhibit different learning needs. And if we're going to truly realize the endless possibilities of technology, it is so very important that we fill our classrooms with teachers that are adept at using various technologies. And it's just important that school administrators know and understand, what does technology integration really look like in a classroom? Dan Holden, in his article, The Litany, tells us that technology in the hands of good, well-trained teachers makes them great. But technology in the hands of incompetent teachers makes them more incompetent. Well, I believe it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that teachers are well equipped and proficient in using 21st century schools. And that's what DOT is about. In fact, one of my favorite four-letter words, and I'm sure one of yours, NCLB, instructed us that by 2006, all educators must be proficient in using technology in the education process. And because they ordained it, well, we know that did not happen, and we know that it is impossible for that to have happened. But now with ESEA or NCLB, which I hope will be renamed because sadly I do think that many, many children have been left behind. Well, the expectation is that ESA is going to be reauthorized this year, possibly early next year. And you can bet there will be more 21st century expectations in it. When we talk about these kids that are different, who are these kids? Who are these students in our classrooms? They're being called the millennials. They are very, very technologically sophisticated. They were born between 1982 and 2000. They are the largest American generation, 27% of our population, 70 million strong. They are the largest global generation. 1 in 5 people on the planet, 1.2 billion, under 25. They are the most diverse generation, and we can celebrate that. 31% of minorities, more diverse than the adult population, and at least 20% of those students have one immigrant parent. These kids think it's cool to be close to their parents and cool to be smart. They believe doing well in school is very, very important in their life. They gravitate towards group activities. That's what technology is about. They're fascinated by technology. And they have an unprecedented impact on adult purchases. So let's look at a vision of who are these K-12 students. these millennials' relationship with their parents are understandably complex. While mom and dad were likely to have spent their youth questioning their own parents' authority, this new generation rebels by becoming more socially responsible, socially involved from a very early age, the crib, via the internet. You know, if you think about it, they're essentially responsible for the election of our president. These millennials have embraced the ideas that their parents rarely considered at their age. Even though 3 out of 4 millennials have working mothers, an amazing 79% still look up to their parents. And only 13% of them have that kind of respect for professional athletes. Mark Prinsky, who coined the digital native and the digital immigrant terms to illustrate the divide between students and teachers in the digital age, explained the problem. The single biggest problem facing education today is that our digital immigrant instructors who speak an outdated language, that of pre-digital age, are struggling to teach a population that speaks an entirely different language. Digital natives, our kids, are used to receiving information really fast. They like to parallel process and multitask. They prefer their graphics before their text rather than the opposite. They prefer random access. They function best when networked. They thrive on instant gratification and frequent rewards. They prefer games to serious work. Digital immigrant teachers assume that learners are the same as they've always been, and that the same methods that worked for the teachers when they were students will now work with those students today. But ladies and gentlemen, that assumption is no longer valid. Today's learners are different. Is it that digital natives can't pay attention, or do they choose not to? Often from the natives' point of view, their digital immigrant instructors are making their education not worth paying attention to compared to everything else they experience. And then we blame them for not paying attention. This is why it's so critically important that we as school leaders in the classroom, school leaders in the administration office, in the district office, at the state level, that we understand what our students need and want is so important, but that we have our own 21st century skill set, and we need to get it in place so that we really, really know what integrating technology looks like in a classroom. What are these kids doing? 72% of them use the internet to complete school assignments. They use online messaging. What else are they doing? They're doing everything. They're sending email, they're surfing, they're going to internet sites, they're researching products and services, probably for their parents so they can put it on their Christmas list. They listen to music online. They go to chat rooms. They buy things. They create web pages. These students want to learn.
Probably the most important thing for kids growing up today is the love of embracing routines. The catch for preparing students for the 21st century workforce is how do you get kids to have curiosity and a quest to disposition. We've called it in the past the gaming disposition. Is if you look at the disposition of hardcore gamers, such as World of Warcraft, massive multiplayer games, the surprising things you find, contrary to what people think, is these kids, first of all, are incredibly bottom line oriented. They want to be measured because they want to see how much they're improving. And in fact, the most common mantra of a real gamer is if I ain't learning, it ain't fun.
I don't think any kids are born negative. I think kids are born consuming media, but I don't think kids are born producing media. So almost any kid that you look at and you say, oh, wow, this is a great user of digital media, you can trace back there's a parent, there's a program, there's something that inspired them and developed them.
Part of the opportunity here is learning the content, which is very much the 20th century idea around education. But in the 21st century, it's learning the tools and the skills of remaking that content and becoming the creator and the producer.
We know that the learning outside of school matters tremendously for the learning in school. So a lot of what we're trying to say about kids' informal learning with new media is part of an already existing set of understandings that educators have of the importance of the home environment, for the peer environment, for the community, for learning that happens in schools. The question is, how can we be more active about linking those two together?
We just assumed when we opened the school that digital media would be available at all moments. And we have a technology philosophy around bring it out when we need it and put it away when we don't need it. We have a wireless building, the kids use laptops, and the reason we do that is so that we can put them away when it's actually not the best tool for them to be learning with.
We find when we talk about 21st century skills, people will often reduce them to skills for the workplace and skills involving technology. And we really are thinking about skills for creativity, for civic engagement, for social life, the full range of experiences that young people will be involved in the future.
I think for teachers and schools and classroom learning, there's still an incredibly important role to play, which is about giving kids access across the board to a baseline set of standards, literacies, expectations about what they need to participate in contemporary society, be reflective, and to also take opportunity of the fact that you really have kids and adults in a shared space that's safe, that's sanctioned, that gives kids an opportunity to reflect on things in their everyday life. It's not just about them being immersed in it all the time. So I think that there are incredibly important functions for schools. What we're saying by valuing informal learning is not that we should abandon formal learning, but that we should get those working together in a much more coordinated way.
Well, these millennial kids, they want to learn. The problem is, they don't want to learn the way we might be teaching them. They want to learn in teams. They want to be online. They want to learn on their own terms. They want to use technology, and they want to do things that matter. They want learning to be relevant. They want accessible, available education. They want dependable, one-stop or no-stop service that's high-tech but personal. These kids are different. They're very different. Those of you that are as old as I am know that television definitely changed the way that children think and learn. And many of my educator friends bemoan the fact that, oh, we have to entertain kids in a classroom today. It's undermining the quality of education. But ladies and gentlemen, I would say to you that television didn't go away, and schools adapted. Textbooks became more visual. Film strip projectors gave way to TV monitors, VCRs, and teachers were expected to be more enthusiastic and energetic in their delivery. And I submit to you today that there's another phenomenon that has reshaped the way children think, learn, and communicate. The internet has become pervasive in homes across America. And we're 10 years from the last U.S. Census report in 2000, and I'm anxiously awaiting the new one that's going to be coming out, because even back in 2000, it was 42% of households could log on, and that was up 18% from just 3 years before that. Emailing and messaging had been woven into America's lives. Many computers had been in homes. And so, what should we be thinking about as a country? Well, I think we should be thinking about the fact that we're not leading this race anymore. If you look down the left side of the screen, you'll see the countries that lead us in internet broadband penetration. And we need to do something about that, and Congress has. The National Broadband Plan has been released. It was signed into law February of last year. And these national initiatives are intended to accelerate broadband deployment across our country. And the Recovery Act tells the FCC they shall create a plan. It was released. You can see it at this website. But what this means is funding, empowerment, and leadership is going to be taking us to the level where we can compete globally. The Trend Letter, which is a newsletter published by the Global Network, recently identified 14 trends that will have the greatest impact on society in this new millennium. And the number one trend is the growth and the reach of the internet. Let me demonstrate the validity in that trend for you. The AP recently reported it took 4 years to reach 1 million web addresses, 15 months to reach 2 million. It's been shrinking, 11 weeks to make 6 million. And in July 2000, there were 2.1 billion. But the interesting thing is that there are 7 million new web pages each day being created. That's about 2.5 billion per year. To me, that's mind-boggling when you think about digital content. The Trend Letter goes on to say that the internet is the single most important development of the 20th century, and it will shape this century, the 21st century, in ways we cannot even imagine. The internet is changing all the rules. And I believe that's exactly what's happening to teaching and learning. As these next generation kids work their way through our schools, they're growing up as intimate users of computers and enthusiastic internet surfers. These youngsters are challenging many of the rules that we've taken for granted throughout our careers. Don Tapscott, in his nationally acclaimed book, Growing Up Digital, The Rise of the Net Generation, and in his newest book, Grown Up Digital, How the Net Generation is Changing Your World, lists 10 themes of net generation culture. This strong independence, this innovation, free expressions. I love the investigations. That's what they're interested in doing. Preoccupation with maturity. Yes, they're growing up too fast, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing. What does this mean? What does this mean for us as educators? Well, we need to provide these students with some control over their own learning experience. They need engaging curriculum. It needs to be real world. They need to be learning about local and global communities of practice, and they need to learn in our classrooms, but also outside of our classrooms. You know, I believe that many educators today are teaching as if our students today were just like they were when we were in school, and they're not. The way we are teaching and the way kids learn today and will learn tomorrow have begun to clash. If we don't do something about that, we're never going to realize the endless possibilities of technology. And I believe there is no doubt that our path is clear. We as responsible educators, those of us with what I call a passion for the profession, should remember one of my very favorite sayings. When you travel at the speed of light, you don't need a rearview mirror. So I think we need to get busy and get busy fast. And I think Mississippi and DOT is doing that. We must quit talking about what we used to do. We need to quit thinking about the good old days, because we're in the good old days. These are the best days of our lives in public education, and organizations like DOT are leading the way and galvanizing and providing a catalyst for all of us. I want to share quickly in closing some anecdotal research Dr. Ken Strange reported after interviewing this generation of millennial kids. And he calls it things kids wish their teachers knew about technology. Technology is not the monster under the bed. Don't treat it like math. It's okay not to know, but more importantly, it's okay if I know. Broken technology, no big deal for me. Let me help you. And you need to have fun with your kids. I'd like to leave you with some closing words. And these are words that I hope you'll remember because they're ageless. They come from that brilliant philosopher, Plutarch. Words that were meaningful 2,000 years ago and words that I think are very meaningful today. The mind is a fire to be kindled, not a vessel to be filled. So, Mississippi, I challenge you to be what I'd like to term an educational arsonist. Light some fires in your classroom. Kindle your students' quest for knowledge with the endless possibilities of technology, and relish your participation in what we know is the most powerful profession on earth, and that is teaching. It's been my pleasure to meet with you this morning. I wish you the very best day and the very best school year as you begin the possibilities of what you can do with technology in your schools, your districts, your classrooms, and certainly in your state. Thank you.